I'm a wealthy woman, Lisa, a bit of an outcast, and I've been in an open marriage since tying the knot. There are all sorts of female celebrities and online influencers circling around Jake, coming and going like koi fish in a pond, while I have a bunch of guys vying for my attention behind my back. I figured this was how my life would roll forever, until Jake's old flame came back to town and personally pressured me into getting a divorce. I didn't hesitate to agree to end things. Then I turned around, ready to give some formal status to a young guy who was totally smitten with me. Just then, Jake showed up, and a heated argument erupted between us. He's mine. On the night of our 7th anniversary, Jake didn't come home. The carefully prepared dinner on the table had already gone cold, covered with a gross layer of hardened grease. I grabbed my phone and saw a post on Jake's friends' social feeds. It was a recent pic showing my husband Jake bowing his head to kiss a woman, displaying a soft and affectionate look I'd never seen in his eyes before. He was holding the girl tight, like she was the most precious thing in the world. That profile pic stung my eyes. Mia, it wasn't the first time I'd seen her. Over the past 7 years, each of Jake's girlfriends kind of resembled her. Now that she was back, she immediately made their relationship official. Suddenly, I felt I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jake, but he hung up on me. I tried again, and he hung up once more. The third time, Mia's playful voice came through. "Who's calling Jake's phone? Must have had my name saved, so she's trying to get Jake to answer." I didn't want to say much to her. "It's Lisa. Can I talk to Jake, please?" My heart feels squeezed, like something's tightening inside me. "Tell him to come back. I need to chat with him." She chuckled softly. "I'll pass the message, but anything else, it's up to Jake." After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Tonight, I had a message for Jake. The pregnancy test result was on the table, now as useless as the cold, untouched dinner. I told myself, if Jake didn't come back tonight, then he didn't need to return at all. And he didn't. The next day, I booked an appointment with a friend to hit the hospital for some meds. After hesitating for ages, I finally went through with it. I bled a lot, felt super dizzy, and while lying in bed, I felt something leaving my heart along with the blood. When Jake finally came back, it was already a week later. He walked in, kicked off his shoes, grabbed some ice water, barely glanced at me, and spoke impatiently. "What's up? Hurry up, I need to bounce soon." I gave him a casual look and slid the divorce papers I had prepped onto the table. "The divorce papers are ready. Check the property division, and if it's cool, sign them." Jake paused his drink, looking puzzled. "You want a divorce?" It was the first time since he walked in that he looked at me directly. Yeah, everyone thought we were a perfect match, but only I knew I actually loved him and even begged my parents to let me marry him. I thought love would grow stronger over time, but I didn't realize some people are just naturally cold-hearted. At the start of our marriage, Jake did try to put in the effort. Both of us were first-timers at marriage, and there was still that spark between us. Everything was harmonious, and back then, he hardly went out. His friends would call him to go out drinking, but he'd politely decline, holding me tight and saying he wanted to be with his wife. After that, he'd act cute and playful with me. "Babe, do you think I'm doing a good job?" Unable to resist, I'd laugh and kiss him affectionately. Jake's sincerity and wholeheartedness when trying to please someone could melt even the iciest heart. We'd play games together in the game room and cuddle watching movies in the home theater. Watching the main characters kiss in movies naturally led to more intimacy, but I still didn't get pregnant. Both his family and mine pressured me a lot. Despite medical reports saying there was nothing wrong with me, they wouldn't stop nagging me to go for a checkup. I knew exactly where the problem was, every time Jake would take precautions. So how could I possibly get pregnant? I thought he just wanted to spend time alone with me, and we silently agreed not to bring it up. During those 2 years, I truly loved him. On his birthday, I dressed up as the bunny girl he once mentioned and presented myself to him in a gift box. But that night, he came back super late, reeking of booze. I went up to help him, but he looked at me strangely. "You'd go this far for me?" I nodded subconsciously, thinking, it was for his birthday. "Aren't you happy?" He stared at me for a long while, his smile somewhat indifferent. "Happy?" That night, Jake was unbelievably rough. It was so painful. The next morning, I woke up blushing and wanting to hug him, only to find he was already cold. Jake was tying his tie in front of the mirror. He saw me sitting up through the mirror with undisguised mockery on his face. You really go all out for your family. People say you look classy, but privately, you're pretty wild. I underestimated you. I was stunned. What people? Where did they come from? I found out later. That day, my dad went to see Jake, saying there was an issue with the production line at our family factory and funds were cut, leading to a big sum needing compensation. But in reality, it was my stepmother's two brothers lining their pockets there. In the end, it was me who got scolded by my dad as a jinx. This was the start of our rift. Later, I discovered his bad mood that night was because Mia had messaged him. She wished him a happy birthday and then asked, "Will you wait for me forever?" He replied, "I will." As expected, I fell for it, and Jake got really angry. He accused me of being shady. I was confused. We were a normal couple. So, why was I labeled as shady? It wasn't until much later that I found out because my family was declining rapidly. My dad was scared I couldn't handle Jake's child. He and my stepmother actually bribed our family nanny to poke holes in all the coats, hoping the child wouldn't survive. And I thought it was an accident. Jake was known as a playboy and knew how to charm women. But then he started making all sorts of demands on me, not letting me have wavy curls, only straight black hair, not letting me wear flashy makeup, only light makeup. At that time, I loved him deeply and thought he finally fell for me. So his controlling side emerged. It wasn't until I saw a photo of him and Mia in his study that I cried and made a scene, but Jake just gave me a disdainful look and left without saying anything. Later, he started looking for various female celebrities and Instagram models who resembled Mia. Until one time, I overheard him and his friends joking in a bar. "She's not really fun to hang with, even though she looks pure on the surface. She's actually like a piece of wood, no fun at all." His buddies burst into laughter. "Are you sure? Are you afraid she'll get mad?" Jake's slightly drunken voice came in. "What's there to worry about? She's just my lapdog. Kicking her won't make her leave." I stood at the door of the private room for a long time, then turned and left. After that, I started seeking out various young men too. Jake didn't care at all. He was sure that I loved him madly and couldn't believe I could fall for someone else. "What are you causing trouble for again?" Jake frowned. "Didn't we agree to see other people? What more do you want? Maybe there was something to say in the past." "Now it's probably just jealousy. Make room for your crush." I waved my phone at him. "Your little lover sent me bed photos of you too. I can't stand it. After 7 years together, don't make me sue for divorce. Let's end it amicably." Jake glanced at those photos and snorted. "You've seen crazier stuff before." "I'll tell her to stop making a fuss." I calmly interrupted him. "Jake, let's get a real divorce. I have someone else." Jake said halfway, then stopped. "Fine, you have someone else." He almost maliciously smirked. "Call them here, and I'll sign the papers." Even now, he still thinks my divorce papers are just a scare tactic. I sighed and took out my phone to make a call. "Come over." This time, Jake was no longer calm. "Who are you calling?" He thought for a moment. "Is it the lead singer from that live house last time? The one who brought you back? You didn't even think if he can afford you, I can afford him." I shrugged at Jake. "Don't forget, my family is also loaded, right?" It seemed like Jake was just realizing now that I came from a wealthy family too, and before that, it was just my obsession with him that made him think he was superior. I presented him with so many projects, hoping he'd appreciate my efforts, but in the end, he treated me like a fool. His expression finally darkened. "Lisa, are you serious?" The roar of a motorcycle sounded. My guy finally arrived, shouting loudly outside. "Sis, I'm here to pick you up." I casually took off my homewear and grabbed the sexy leather suspenders and shorts lying on the nearby sofa, then walked out directly. "Come back, check out what you're wearing." Jake yelled frantically behind me. "Remember to sign the papers." I raised my middle finger to him and rode away on the back of the motorcycle, leaving dust behind. The guy's eyes lit up when he saw me. "Sis, you look so hot today." I grabbed his face and kissed him on the cheek. "I can be even hotter." His face gradually turned red. His name was Ryan. He was the lead singer of a band, with his gray hair dyed. The first time we met, the live house was packed. He got so hyped while singing that he casually took off his shirt, and the sweat trickled down his honey-toned chest muscles and abs, causing screams from the crowd. I admit, I was attracted by his looks. A friend happened to know the organizer, and that night we arranged to meet at the bar and invited their band to drink together. When Ryan was called to come, he was very reluctant, acting all cool and tough. But then he saw me. He swallowed the latter part of his sentence. He obediently sat next to me that night, and I thought he recognized the $1 million watch on my wrist, but little did I know his ambitions were even greater. Later, I heard from a friend that after that night, Ryan quietly asked her for my contact info. She didn't give it at first, but after a while, she went to the live house again, and to her surprise, he immediately recognized me after the performance. He ran to me like an excited husky, his face full of joy. "Sis, you finally came." He also looked a little aggrieved. "I've been singing for a month just to see you." I couldn't help but reach out and ruffle his gray hair, his whole face wrinkled up. "Men shouldn't be patted on the head." When I stopped, he obediently lowered his head and leaned in. "Except you." Then Jake's calls kept coming in, persistently. "It's hard to imagine he wouldn't call me for a whole week," Ryan volunteered. "Should I answer for you?" I thought of Mia's sassy appearance, disgustingly exaggerated, and casually tossed the phone to him. "You can answer." As soon as the call connected, there came Jake's furious roar from the other end. "Lisa, get back here." Is there a dog barking? Ryan picked up the phone and deliberately said hello several times. Jake on the other end was almost about to explode. "Let Lisa answer the phone." "Who do you think you are?" "Me? I'm someone who makes her happy." Ryan chuckled. "She's not coming back tonight." Then he hung up. Did I perform well? Ryan was loyal, and I scrutinized his handsome jaw for a while, deliberately asking him, "I called you to meet my husband. Are you not scared?" Ryan stared at me intensely, the light in his eyes frighteningly bright. I suddenly felt something was off, just about to let go. Unexpectedly, he suddenly got closer, pushing me against the wall, his breath misting on the side of my neck. "What are you doing?" He smiled, his nose teasingly rubbing mine, slowly reading out the message I had just sent him, word by word. "Want to meet my husband? Are you scared?" "I'm so scared, but since you've let me be your shield, shouldn't you pay me first?" Then the young guy pressed me down with his strength. Ryan easily held me with one hand, placed me on the table, his voice low and magnetic. "Sis, your husband isn't good." The young man's body radiated intense heat, and he smiled wickedly. "Do you want to try me?" The next morning, when I got up with a sore back, Ryan was still asleep. His sleeping profile was pure and clean, but his exposed muscular back was covered with crisscrossing blood marks. I was furious. He was like a mad dog last night, didn't listen at all, and by the end, I was in tears. Seeing him about to wake up, I quickly tiptoed out. I had never been so disheveled in my life. It wasn't until I sat down in the office that I finally breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, an undeniable soreness came from my waist, and I sat on the office chair, grimacing in pain, daring not to move. When the secretary came in to deliver documents for me to sign, her gaze kept glancing at my neck. It wasn't until I went to the bathroom that I discovered it. My neck was a sight to behold. With a dark face, I picked up my phone and saw that Ryan had sent me several messages, feeling quite wronged. "Lisa, aren't you satisfied with my performance? Why did you run away as soon as I woke up?" "Lisa, my bad. Give me a chance. I love you the most." I emotionlessly turned off the screen. After Mia returned home, Jake was afraid of upsetting her. He, a busy man, catered to her every need, practically giving his heart out for her. The last time I saw a message from him was a confession video from a drone group on TikTok. Hundreds of drones formed a square, creating a picture of a couple kissing, then it exploded into a sky full of scattered light dots. The host in the video excitedly raised his phone and screamed, "Whose confession scene is this?" Upon closer inspection, I realized these tactics were all things he had used on me before. The ring he used to propose years ago, the drone video had been trending for a while. My emotions were just rehearsed on me. Now that his crush had returned, he naturally wanted to show her rehearsed, intense affection. As expected, That night, Mia posted a photo on Twitter of her holding hands tightly with a man. The ring on her left ring finger was very eye-catching. "Thank you for always waiting for me, Jake." Sharp-eyed netizens quickly noticed that the ring in the photo matched the one from the video that night. Mia's fans were moved to tears. What a beautiful love story, the cello goddess and the young master's pure love myth. Mom, I believe in love again. Finally, some people online began to question. Doesn't Jake have a wife? I immediately recognized it was Jake's hand. Why doesn't he take off the watch I bought him before fooling around with other women? Then some netizens uploaded a grid of photos from my wedding with Jake. Fans were utterly embarrassed. They began to claim, the one not loved is the other. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. I immediately posted a statement online confirming my identity. Mia has always portrayed herself as the elegant and noble cello goddess. If she was wronged, Jake naturally had to make it up to her. The company announced her as their new spokesperson, but it didn't seem to have much effect. Everyone knows that I, as his wife, am known for my resilience. Now, even I couldn't help but come out to mock, and the netizens were suddenly more excited. As the situation escalated, I received a call from my dad. Come back home? As soon as I entered the house, a harsh slap greeted me. In front of me was my father's face, twisted with anger. Kneel down. I felt waves of darkness before my eyes, and it took me a while to come to my senses. What did I do wrong? Lisa, you've lost all dignity. Considering the divorce, we can't afford to lose this person from our family, our kind of family. I covered my face, coldly mocking him. Are you referring to those who maintain their so-called dignity by living off leftovers from their family? Now that Jake's crush has returned home and he's showing affection so openly, should I go ahead and become a joke for everyone? He was furious, his nostrils flaring as he exhaled vigorously. It's all because of your incompetence. 7 years, and not a single child. You deserve to be dumped. His stepmother brought tea to comfort him. Don't stress yourself. This can't be solely Lisa's fault. Jake is known as a playboy. This should just be a phase. She turned around and deliberately urged me again. Lisa, Aunt specially went to get you some fertility meds. If you take them, you'll definitely conceive a child. Men should have a son. Behind her, my half-brother from another mother was looking at me smugly, making a lewd gesture. My family had been declining for years. The family business largely relied on Jake's support. My dad held on to our family business with my mother's help. My mother, in poor health, only gave birth to me, a daughter, but my dad always longed to have a son to inherit the company. Only a month after my mother's death, my stepmother walked in with a protruding belly, and that's when my nightmare began. Whenever the family faced any issues, my stepmother would kindly suggest seeking help from Jake. After all, it was hard to refuse help when the family was in such a tough spot. She always put on a gentle appearance. So, they thought Lisa was lucky. Their family was wealthy, and even a small amount of help from them could sustain us for a lifetime. Besides, with the family doing well, not only would Lisa have a backing, but it could also help my half-brother in the future. Then she turned and struck up a conversation with Mia, and then it happened again and again. In Jake's eyes, I became even more shameless, willingly degrading myself. I originally thought Jake would step up to protect his crush. After all, in the art circle, one could be uninhibited but mustn't ruin their reputation. Unexpectedly, that evening, the company's official account announced that Mia was their spokesperson, and then there was no other news. Given that Jake was already married, apart from some of Mia's fanatical followers, the public's perception leaned more towards normalcy. As a result, Mia's reputation took a hit, with reports saying that several concert tickets were returned. Just when I was wondering, my friend Emma called me, laughing heartily on the other end. Serves him right. Something's up with Jake's family. Ever since she got a boyfriend, this guy has been looking radiant, encouraging me every day to do the same. Very shady. What's the story? I heard from Steve that there's another illegitimate child from Jake's family that showed up. I wasn't particularly interested. Isn't this just keeping up appearances? Jake and his dad are really cut from the same cloth. When his dad was young, he too was known as a playboy and only settled down later in life. But still, there would occasionally be some rumors about him outside. There would be so-called long-lost relative acts happening every now and then. Emma burst out laughing. This time it seems real. Apparently, he returned from studying at Oxford, the child of his dad's long-lost love. Back then, these two were separated by their families, sending their first love abroad, who unexpectedly remained silent for over 20 years overseas, and even had kids. Coincidentally, their company was having its annual meeting at this time. Of course, I didn't want to go, but emotions are emotions. Business is business. However, Emma told me they were planning to publicly acknowledge their relationship at the annual meeting and also hinted for me to bring Ryan along for her to see. I thought about it and called Ryan. Are you free tonight? Accompany me to an event. But to my surprise, he actually turned me down, sounding embarrassed on the phone. Lisa, I have a gig tonight that I can't bail on. Young guys, indeed unreliable. True to form, Jake was standing next to Mia. There I was, and there he was, parading around with his mistress. All eyes intentionally or unintentionally shifted towards me, but Jake didn't even spare me a glance, clearly trying to embarrass me. Mia's friends, naturally, weren't going to stay behind. As I was grabbing dessert, I overheard two of Mia's friends gossiping. Ridiculous, a person like that also showed up at the annual meeting. They're all about to divorce, yet still putting on a show like this. If I were her, I'd be ashamed enough to file for divorce voluntarily. I walked straight up to the two of them. Who are you talking about? Who's getting a divorce? These girls nowadays are really something. Do your blind dates know you're already thinking about divorce and dividing the assets before marriage? But if you need it, I can introduce you to the best divorce lawyer. My voice wasn't low, and Mia's friends didn't expect me to confront them directly. Everyone's eyes turned over, and their faces immediately flushed. Emma came over just in time to witness the scene. I said, "Are you rushing in to stand up for your friend sincerely, or do you also want to take her place?" Having their thoughts exposed, the two women stamped their feet and left angrily. Pathetic! I shook my head. This level of fighting power is just embarrassing. Emma wasn't alone. She had Steve behind her. Emma impatiently sent him away. You go play by yourself. I have something to talk to Lisa about. Steve didn't look too pleased, but under Emma's stern gaze, he walked away with a look of dismay. The two of them seemed to have a good relationship, and seeing Emma finally get over her past relationship with her ex-boyfriend, I genuinely felt happy for her. There was definitely some chemistry between them, just a little short of something. But for some people, once something is missed, it's missed. They had done several DNA tests, so it should be correct. I nodded. No wonder why Jake looked embarrassed and didn't dare to openly defend Mia. After all, I was never within his protection range. By the way, Emma looked at me with some concern. I heard there's some trouble in your dad's company again. Be careful, they might come after you. It's fine, I reassured her. I'm prepared, just hoping they won't make a move. Just then, I heard the sound of spoons tapping on wine glasses, and everyone's eyes turned towards the source of the sound. Jake's father was dressed up with a vibrant look tonight, his face showing uncontrollable joy. In stark contrast, his wife's face was filled with sorrow. Let me introduce my youngest son, Ryan, who has recently returned to the country. His gray hair had been dyed back to black, his bangs pushed back to reveal a handsome forehead. He looked somewhat familiar to me, and now he stood on the side in a three-piece suit, chin up, with a cold and distant expression. I was shocked to realize his subtle resemblance to Jake. I couldn't believe that the illegitimate child was Ryan. How could he be Jake's brother? Wow, you are quite something. Jake suddenly appeared behind me, looking at his father with a grim face, every word he uttered cutting like a knife. Did you know he was my dad's illegitimate child? That's why you made your move ahead of time. Couldn't handle being just a stepbrother, so went for the illegitimate one. Your family really plans far ahead. Jake's words were sharp and filled with disdain. I chuckled. Perhaps you need to have your head examined. Your controlling mom couldn't even find your brother. Why would you think I would know? Oh, and if you don't want Mia to end up with a bastard like your brother, you better sign those divorce papers quickly. Jake's eyes narrowed. He glared at me. I received an anonymous letter a few days ago, with a pregnancy report attached. I poked his chest, honestly. I'm not interested in the four-dimensional ultrasound of a bastard. Mia is quite interesting. I giggled. You really think a pregnancy report can drive me crazy? How absurd. It's like anyone can have one of these? Just when the tension between us was escalating, his father's voice broke in. Lisa, come and meet your brother, Ryan. The standard smile on Ryan's face didn't waver when he saw me. He even politely extended his hand towards me like meeting a stranger. Hello. I looked at him coldly, showing no intention of shaking hands. His father's face darkened, a warning in his eyes. Lisa, Ryan was flexible. Seeing that I didn't shake his hand, he smiled and withdrew it without feeling embarrassed. Since he was ready to make family ties, having met Jake before, how could he not recognize me? Jake's reaction was probably the opposite. He was probably wondering how his beloved brother, with such meticulous intentions, approached me to stir things up. The atmosphere was unbearably awkward. After a few forced exchanges, Ryan was taken away. But in that passing moment, a note was suddenly slipped into my hand. Some people may seem upright in public, but engage in despicable acts privately, like passing notes to their sister-in-law. I glanced at the note. It was from Ryan. Lisa, give me a chance to explain to you. With a pitiful puppy head drawn on it, I crumpled the note and tossed it aside. When I came out of the restroom, I found someone waiting at the door. Honestly, I was already in a bad mood at this point. But someone was still eager to make trouble. I stopped in my tracks, looking at Mia in front of me. What are you here for? You got that photo, right? Mia dropped her goddess smile, crossed her arms against the door, looking mocking. Then what? I asked her. So, why haven't you divorced yet? Mia sneered. You surely know that you've always been my stand-in. As long as I say a word, Jake won't let you get pregnant. You've been married for 7 years. Isn't his mom a pushover? Now that I'm back, he came to me first and announced our relationship, and here you are still holding on to this position. Have you no shame? I clapped for her. Well said. Why don't you go tell Jake that? Why don't you marry him? Is it because you don't want to? Mia's face immediately turned sour. That's because you refuse to divorce. I kindly pointed her the way. The next time you show up at my door to sleep with him, check the third drawer in the bedside table. I've already placed the divorce papers there, with the name signed. I've wanted a divorce for a long time. It's him who refuses. I pushed past the stunned Mia, patting her shoulder. Mia shouted after me as I headed downstairs. Do you think you've won? As I was about to take a detour, I saw my father trying to cozy up to Jake. While he always showed courtesy to his elders, there was a hint of impatience in his eyes now. Just as I was about to walk away, a hand grabbed mine. I instinctively turned around, only to see Mia's face filled with hatred. Then she fell back heavily with a loud scream. All eyes turned to see Mia screaming as she fell from upstairs. And there was my hand, left hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Jake's father was asking Ryan to introduce himself. Everything seemed to slow down. I saw Jake rushing towards Mia without hesitation. I saw his father's face change color in an instant. I saw my father storming over, pointing and shouting at me in anger. Jake yelled at me while holding Mia. Lisa, what have you done to her? Mia, clutching his arms, looked as if she was bearing great suffering and injustice. Jake, I'm fine. Don't make things difficult for Lisa, she said, tears welling up in her eyes and rolling down. In the midst of the chaos, the microphone was gently tapped, and a young male voice with a smile sounded. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Ryan, just returned to the country this year. Even Mia, who was sobbing in Jake's arms, lifted her head. With a stern face, Jake bellowed at me. Lisa, what are you doing? In the quiet environment, his words sounded especially abrupt. Ryan flashed me a familiar, sinister smile. He then walked over, stood in front of me, and looked at Jake provocatively. Brother, what do you want to do to her? He glanced around. This is a family meeting. All our partners are here. And here you are, embracing another woman outside, pointing at your wife, and yelling, Do you think this is appropriate? People around started whispering. Their father treasured his reputation, his face almost purple with rage. Jake and Ryan, the conflict between the two was about to erupt. Jake stared at Ryan's hand, gripping my wrist tightly. Let her go. Just then, Mia suddenly cried out in pain, blood gushing from her legs, staining the floor red in no time. Jake was thrown into confusion. Ambulance, ambulance. Unfortunately, the venue for the annual meeting was the top floor hall. and the elevator was taking forever to arrive. In a fit of panic, Jake carried Mia and ran downstairs. At the same time, I felt a light touch on my feet, and Ryan effortlessly scooped me up. "Let's go, I'll take you to the hospital." I looked at him in confusion, and he winked at me. "Lisa, do you want to stay here?" I tilted my head and closed my eyes quickly. Just as Jake dashed out with Mia in his arms, the press outside, who had been waiting for a long time, went wild taking photos. Mia's fans were there too, mourning and crying, accusing me of being a heartless person. With some malicious thoughts, I wondered if they thought I had fallen to my death right there. Without even looking, I could guess what the headline of the day would be. People thrust microphones towards me, each question piercing through my soul. I sat up straight in a state of shock, flipping him off. "Do you use your mouth for eating food and excrement at the same time?" The journalist was infuriated. Ryan quickly used his suit to cover me. Under the escort of a group of bodyguards, he carried me and hurried into the waiting car. As I stepped into the car, I vaguely heard Jake calling out to me. I wanted to turn back but was held down. "Don't listen, it's just a dog barking." My phone began vibrating nonstop, flooded with numerous messages, which I couldn't be bothered to read. Well, this was just great. I reckoned Jake and I would share the headlines tomorrow. He took his crush to the hospital late at night. His illegitimate brother took me away from the annual meeting venue overnight. After driving for a while, I ordered the car to stop. "What's wrong, Lisa?" Ryan turned from the passenger seat. "What do you think? Pretending to be innocent at a time like this?" I almost burst out laughing. I reached for the door. Ryan was taken aback. "Stop! Let's talk!" He asked the driver to pull over, took the wheel himself, and then started to stall. I didn't lie. I was acting, still pretending to be clueless at this point. "Are you?" I glanced at him casually. "Ryan, if you're going to act this way, then there's nothing more to talk about." He turned back to look at me firmly, his earlier frivolous demeanor fading, replaced by a hint of frustration as he scratched his head. "I understand." The car was driven to the seaside. Ryan didn't rush to speak. He hopped out of the car, leaned against it, and started smoking one by one. The cigarette ends flickered red in the darkness. I knew he was nervously calculating how much to say and where to stop. Indeed, a top-notch Oxford graduate. I crossed my arms, waiting for the clever bad boy to start his performance. "Lisa, I did approach you with ulterior motives at the beginning." He indeed resorted to playing the sympathy card, pitifully reaching for my hand. "Yes, I see." I couldn't help but sneer. "By getting close to you, making Jake notice you, and then finding a way to confront him with your discovered background, turning your competition into a ladder for my advancement. What's more amazing is that this was initiated by Jake himself. Should I commend you for creating such a flawless plan?" Ryan visibly hesitated. "Lisa, you really see through me. That was indeed my initial intention. But then I realized you actually piqued my interest. When I saw Jake yelling at you for another woman, I couldn't help but step in. Seriously, if I wanted to use you, I wouldn't have stepped in under those circumstances. The more Jake loses control, consumed by another woman, the more advantageous it is for me." I refuse to believe his nonsense. "Don't exaggerate things. I thought you were only trying to make your father feel more guilty." He chuckled, blowing out a smoke ring, exuding a somewhat mature and refined vibe in the night breeze. "Lisa, you're too clever. It makes things difficult for me?" "Fine. You did help me just now. Let's call it even." I waved my hand dismissively at him, unwilling to admit that I had actually developed feelings for him. I must have owed the Song family a lot of money in my past life to be entangled with these brothers in this life. The high heels sank into the sand with each step, making me stumble and almost sprain my ankle. Frustrated, I took off the heels and continued walking barefoot. But before I could go far, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. A young man with a feverish body grabbed me from behind tightly, his voice filled with deep grievance. "Lisa, do you really not want me anymore?" I instinctively wanted to kick him, but he grabbed my ankle and pulled me into his arms. The shadow loomed over us as he held my chin firmly, his kiss hiding tremors underneath. Was he afraid? I looked into his eyes, noticing a hint of redness. He lifted me and placed me on the hood of a car, his kisses suddenly gentle and cautious. Lisa, I was wrong. I said all those things out of anger. I had no idea you were his wife when we met at the bar. I can show you before returning home, I had offers from several companies. I never intended to meddle in this mess. My mom had let it go long ago, until I met you. He controlled me between his chest and the car hood, his prominent nose almost touching mine, clingy and shameless. Lisa, do you know you've changed my whole life? His expression was so sincere that, for a moment, I almost forgot to breathe. I did have ulterior motives. His voice was heavy and hoarse. But Lisa, I want to win you back. Jake won't let you go. He's a fool who can't see his own heart. Unlike me, on the first day back home, I already knew who I'd love for the rest of my life. I tried to sit up, but he took the opportunity to steal a kiss. Will you forgive me? Show me your answer. I touched his hair, feeling rough and stiff, seeing Ryan scared and dissatisfied. He continued to touch me. Then, effortlessly, he held me with one hand and sat me on his arm like a large doll, picking up the high heels I had thrown. Let's go back. The news of Mia's miscarriage had been leaked by someone with malicious intent. Jake's mom never wanted Mia in the family, let alone with such a scandal now. It's a total disgrace. That night, Jake actually called me, but it was already past midnight. Maybe after calming Mia down, he finally thought of me, his rightful wife. He didn't sleep, nor cared if others were asleep. Since the call didn't go through, he sent a long message of inquiries. Why did I get involved with Ryan, his illegitimate son? Was I trying to get back at him? Not a single word of concern for me. I replied with the divorce papers backed up on the computer for him to sign before contacting me. Then I blocked him. Throughout all this, Ryan stuck close to me, watching with glee. When our eyes met, he immediately looked away, pretending to focus on his phone screen. Then he turned and asked me, Lisa, can I dance with you? Who could refuse that? His hair was back to gray, a metal mouthguard covering his face with movable wolf ears, wearing a tight black tank top, showing off his tattoos and muscles. After that wild night, I woke up sore only to find an empty bed. Going to the living room, I saw breakfast on the table and a note. Lisa, breakfast is ready. Warm it up when you wake up. I have rehearsals for tonight's birthday. Remember to come to the live house at 8. Looking at the radiant woman in the mirror, I sighed deeply. In the afternoon, I pampered myself at a beauty salon all afternoon. From head to toe, I was meticulously groomed, wearing sunglasses. I had no idea what awaited me that night would be a grand declaration of love. During the final encore, Ryan secretly prepared a confession ceremony behind me. The usually rebellious young man even blushed slightly as he rubbed his nose shyly. Today the guy I like is here, and I want to confess to him, but I'm afraid he'll reject me. A spotlight shone on my seat, and the surrounding crowd burst into laughter and cheers. The clamor grew from scattered to a roaring wave, and I was almost stunned. The young man's love was so fervent and obvious that it almost engulfed me entirely. Ryan walked down from the stage, knelt in front of me, solemnly kissing my hand. Will you accept me? I instinctively covered my mouth, unable to contain my smile, and finally grasped his hand. In that moment, I saw his eyes light up. But what I didn't expect was Jake appearing in the audience. He almost raged as he rushed onto the stage, landing a heavy punch on Ryan's face. She's mine! The two men started fighting on stage, chaos erupting among the fans below, with countless phones recording the scene. It became a mess that was hard to contain. In the end, it all ended with Jake being kicked down from the stage by Ryan. The ambulance came roaring. We all left in a rush until Jake was taken into the emergency room. Ryan came over and sat next to me, his tall figure still looking somewhat pitiful. Lisa, he hit me, he said. Me? It seemed like you were the one who kicked him off the stage, right? He looked even more unhappy. Do you feel sorry for him? I glanced at him and reached out to ruffle his hair. Of course not. Ryan immediately softened, sitting next to me like a well-behaved large dog, even starting to play a game. I must have dozed off, leaning on Ryan's shoulder for some time. The nurse's voice sounded, Excuse me, who's Lisa? The patient wants to see you. I was about to get up, but Ryan next to me pressed me down. You're not going alone. We'll go together. Mia finally showed up at this moment. I had to say, at this moment, she could still put on pitiful makeup. The dedication alone was admirable. I thought for a moment and took out the divorce papers to hand them to her. Go in and see him. Also, sign the papers for me to bring out. I won't go in. Mia was clearly taken aback. I don't care what agreement you reached with my stepmother before. I advise you not to provoke me now, or I don't know what I might do. In that moment, her face turned pale, and she dared not say another word. Of course, she wouldn't dare. My first child was lost because of her and my stepmother's collusion. What was the reward? A measly $200,000. My stepmother's good brother owed $200,000 in gambling debts, asked me to get rid of the child, and Mia was supposed to pay for it. Mia hadn't been in for long when I heard Jake's furious roar. Lisa, come in. Ryan took off his headphones and put them on me, saying, Lisa, there's a dog barking, don't listen. But I didn't expect Jake to have a concussion and still come out to question me. Lisa, we're not divorced yet, and you're accepting a love confession from an illegitimate child in front of so many people. Do you even remember your identity? Have you no shame? I patted the little dog beside me, who was about to go berserk, and calmly asked him back. Isn't it shameless for you to run out hugging a miscarried mistress in front of so many people? Mia's eyes welled up with tears. Jake, it's all my fault. Mia tried to pull him, but he pushed her away, falling to the ground in a sorry state. She was about to pretend to cry, but Jake turned coldly to her. Shut up, all right? Let's not make a scene in the hospital corridor. Show some manners, okay? Ryan lazily interfered. Don't you need rest? Other patients need rest too. I saw the little nurse nodding vigorously. Throughout the whole process, Jake stared at me as if trying to find some hidden feelings for him on my face. What's the point? It wasn't until he was settled in the ward that I handed him the divorce papers again, and he seemed to finally come back to his senses from his dream. Babe, are you serious? Now he's calling me babe again. He didn't say that when he was shouting at me in front of his good friend and mistress. He would only coldly call me by my name. Lisa, get lost. I found it amusing. With your true love and my mistress all here, you still don't want to get a divorce. Sign it quickly and let's go find our true loves. Do you really like him? Jake's voice was terrifying. Ryan sneered, suddenly pulled me close, kissed me on the cheek, then provocatively looked at Jake. She's mine now. I had never seen Jake so furious, as if he had ignited something. He jumped off the bed and went straight for Ryan. The two madmen wrestling was extremely scary, the bed and cabinet making terrible noises when hit, even the glass cracking vigorously from the impact. Jake grabbed Ryan's head, attempting to smash it against the glass. Let him go! I was terrified and quickly rushed to pull Jake away. We're on the 16th floor. If the glass breaks and Ryan falls, he's dead. Just when Jake, who had just refused to let go, saw me coming up to pull him away from Ryan, he was completely stunned, as if he only now understood that I really wanted a divorce from him. Ryan, panting heavily, suddenly there was a loud noise. I didn't see what happened. The situation suddenly reversed. Jake was pinned against the glass. Even more terrifying was that the crack on the glass kept expanding, making a chilling sound. I told you she's mine. Ryan's voice was low and cold. At that moment, I felt he really wanted to kill Jake. She's mine. However, Jake continued to stare at me as if he suddenly lost his will, looking completely lost. You helped him hit me. He seemed to finally understand. This time, I wasn't backing down. I really wanted to separate from him. Before, I made a huge scene in front of him, and he was indifferent. Now that I wanted to leave, he seemed to regret it. Mia's face turned even uglier. She called a nurse over, and after a brave scolding from the nurse, Jake was sent back to bed. Jake only said one thing to her throughout. Don't think I don't know what you did. Get lost. Jake's parents finally arrived. There were too many people on the scene. The news of the two sons fighting over the same woman was something the reporters would love to hear. The news couldn't be suppressed at all. As a result, the trending topic Mia bought a few days ago seemed like a joke. The stock prices plummeted, and the market value evaporated by 20% in just 2 days. Shareholders couldn't sit still, expressing doubts one after another about whether Jake as the heir was the right choice. If Jake continued as chairman, they would consider selling their stocks. Ironically, this worked out even cheaper for Ryan. Jake's father had always lingered on his first love, especially now that his first love had returned with a son in tow. He had to find ways to make it up. Jake's father had a proper extramarital affair. His wife couldn't just let it go. Their family had always been concerned about reputation, but now it became a big joke within their circle. A mutual friend called to tell me that Jake was on the verge of drinking himself to death. I didn't want to go, but Jake snatched the phone. "If you don't come, I won't sign the divorce papers." I checked the time. It was midnight. Just 10 minutes ago, Ryan was secretly messaging me, complaining about international meetings, not considering time zones, and how hungry he was, asking if I could cook him some noodles. Ryan was working diligently while Jake was drowning his sorrows at the bar. It seemed like the power struggle between the two brothers was already pretty clear. When I arrived, Jake's group of friends awkwardly greeted me and dispersed. "Stop pretending to be asleep." I looked at the man on the couch, eyes shut tight, face turning blue, reeking of alcohol. It was really hard to feel any sympathy for him, even if there were any wants. It had completely turned to ashes through his constant abrasiveness. "You came." Jake, unshaven, struggled to sit up, and seeing I had no intention of helping him up, got up on his own sullenly. "Lisa, I miss you so much." I avoided his attempt to hold my hand, feeling repulsed. "The divorce agreement also in the future, if your friends need to find you, they should contact Mia. I'm sure she'd be happy to come get you." Jake started crying, covering his face in agony, his voice filled with despair and choked sobs. "I'm sorry, I really didn't know." Seeing him pull out the pregnancy test report, it dawned on me that I had forgotten it when I left. No wonder Jake had yelled at Mia that day. It seemed he had found out about his crush's deed. So I asked him, "I've loved you for so many years, given my all to you. How could you treat me this way, now that you've lost the top position to Ryan? Or because you've hit rock bottom, you suddenly regret it and turn to me? Do you finally regret it because you realize no one will love you as foolishly as I have?" I said this not as groundless speculation. Mia wasn't someone to underestimate. Realizing Jake was no longer of much use, she seemed to be preparing to migrate overseas again. Ryan came back to present a gift, asking me if I wanted to keep her here. Of course we have to keep her. She had caused so much harm. Did she really think everything would be fine if she fled overseas? Jake's eyes were bloodshot. "Lisa, it's not what you think. I always believed our relationship was full of scheming. I've never dared to believe you loved me too." I told him calmly. "On our 7th anniversary, I called you and Mia answered saying you were in the shower. Didn't she tell you?" Jake's lips trembled. "Lisa, you have to believe me. I really didn't know." He almost looked at my abdomen expectantly, asking tentatively, He's not here." I shook my head. The next day, I had an abortion. "You have a cold heart," Jake accused me. "How could you bear to do it?" I just found it amusing. "Let Mia bear your child," Ryan interjected, wrapping his arm possessively around my shoulder, provocatively eyeing Jake. Jake looked lifeless, finally not saying a word, dejectedly leaving. It was only now that I felt Ryan's tension loosening. Finally, they're gone. That report became to stay abroad for a few years until the heat died down and then returned to make money. After she boarded the plane, I sent her a big gift. Her hands weren't clean for these years, playing backup with Jake while also entangling herself with wealthy locals. More importantly, she had started a pimping business under the guise of giving newcomers a chance, catapulting them into the hands of beasts. Some girls were played to the point of disability, some disappeared, and even the luckiest showed signs of mental issues. And Mia, stepping on these girls' blood and flesh, gradually became a renowned cellist. She returned to the country only to avoid legal consequences. Ryan had arranged for me to receive a live video. Mia was pinned to the ground, screaming in agony, as local police beat her like a dog. As for my dad, stepmother, and their greedy relatives, I had long prepared a pit for them. In recent years, I had been secretly repurchasing the company's shares. Seeing Jake fall, they were quick to latch onto Ryan's benefits, sucking up and trying to mend ties, switching sides with a snap. Well, since they're all family, let's send the whole family neatly to hell. I'll send you off myself. To make up for his past wrongs, Ryan cooperated diligently, digging deep into the case of how the stepmother's shameless relatives had transferred and embezzled company assets. He pushed that entire family to the police under charges of financial fraud. It turned out my dad had asthenospermia. The child my stepmother carried was actually her cousin's. And all these years, my good father had been raising someone else's child. The son he had longed for was actually a bastard. The shock was too much for him. He suffered a stroke. When he woke up, he had become a drooling, silly old man. As for Jake, Ryan ruthlessly kicked both him and his father out of the decision-making level and ascended as a rich man who received annual dividends. Jake always immersed himself in love, unable to distinguish between right and wrong. Some people are meant to rot in the ground. Apart from getting married, I hadn't really thought of getting married so soon. Considering Ryan's previous misconduct, I needed to scrutinize his intentions of being the companion for the rest of my life. As a woman, being financially independent was the key to happiness.